The state legislative session is set to start on Tuesday. Today on Central Florida Spotlight, insights from one of our area's most outspoken legislators, Carlos Guillermo Smith, and then a conversation with the 9th Judicial Circuit's first female chief, Judge Lisa Munyon. Hi, folks, and welcome to this week's edition of Central Florida Spotlight, joined now by State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith, a Democrat representing District 49 in the State House. First of all, thank you for joining us today. And Carlos, last weekend you held a vaccination outreach event in the Azalea Park neighborhood. And you can prove that because you're the first person I have seen with actually a mask line. Can you give us the profile?
Thank you for pointing that out, Greg. It's true. I actually have the double mask line on both sides of my face. I don't know if your viewers can see it, but I suppose that those battle scars are worth it. This Saturday, the 20th of February, we had a vaccination event at the Iglesia Episcopal Jesus de Nazaret in Azalea Park in East Orlando. And it was such an important event because we were able to vaccinate 502 people, mostly Hispanic seniors in the community that we know is so underrepresented and underserved right now. Black and brown communities in the state of Florida represent 40% of our state's population, and yet they only represent 13% of those who have been vaccinated so far. So I'm really proud of our effort to have done this community-based event that promoted not only access for the underserved population that is the Hispanic community in vaccinations for COVID-19, but also in a way that was fair and equitable. I mean, we hit pen and paper and clipboards, hit the ground at grocery stores in the Azalea Park area, from Sedano's supermarket to Bravo, to create more access and equity in the appointment setting process.
I want to know what your reaction was when you saw people receiving those vaccines, because people that I've talked with at various vaccination sites have seen people cry. The emotions are very strong with people.
It's so true. It's so true. You know, it only hits you when you're there to see it with your own eyes. It's not the same as watching it on TV. You know, you see a population that is extremely vulnerable, that has been mostly homebound for the last year or so, worried that if they contract COVID, that they might die from the virus, as unfortunately too many people in the state of Florida already have, close to 30,000 deaths just in Florida alone. But seeing the look of relief that they will be able to soon, after they receive the second vaccination in about a month or so, be able to hug their loved ones, to hug their grandchildren, and be able to get some sort of normalcy in their lives. I can't think of anything that's more rewarding as a public servant than to be able to see that look of relief in the eyes of our constituents.
Boy, I would have to think that that was amazing. So overall, how do you think Florida's vaccination system has worked since the start of the year? Do you think it's improved, worsened, or stayed the same?
Well, I think there's no question that we got off to a rocky start in the state of Florida. You know, we heard about extremely long lines, about frustrations with folks who are unable to book their COVID vaccine appointments. We are still hearing about that, don't get me wrong, and there's definitely a lot of problems right now in the equitable distribution of the vaccine. But things are slowly improving. We are starting to see even more federal supply come down from the Biden administration. We know that that was lacking before, but production has started to increase. But there's still a lot of inequities. You know, for example, we have tried to use our office to be the voice for so many people who've been left behind in the vaccination process. For example, people with comorbidities who are younger than 65. They've been frustrated because while they're authorized by the governor's executive order to get a vaccination through hospital providers, many hospitals, unfortunately, have not created a transparent and equitable process for them to access the vaccine. We know that our school district employees are still struggling to get access, and we know already the inequities that are happening in the Black and Hispanic community, which is why I think it's important for us to be more intentional about having more of these faith-based events to try to get the vaccine out to Black and brown communities.
We'll be right back with more with Carlos Guillermo Smith after this quick break on Central Florida Spotlight. Welcome back to Central Florida Spotlight, joined again by State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. Thanks again for taking time to talk to us today. And Carlos, the 2021 legislative session starts this coming week. What will be your legislative priorities for this session?
That's right. Well, the Florida legislature, unfortunately, is one of 7 legislatures in the United States that did not have a special session to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. Republican leaders in the state took a very hands-off approach, which means we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we are providing relief to the many millions of Floridians who were pushed into poverty by the COVID-19 crisis, and of course the many small businesses who are struggling. You know that I've always tried to be the voice for those who are most vulnerable in the state of Florida, whether it be by advocating for affordable housing, for living wages, for the civil rights of so many people, LGBT people, immigrants, the disabled, our workers. And we know that COVID-19 has exacerbated so many of those pre-existing crises in the state of Florida. That's why I want to use my role on the House Pandemics and Public Emergencies Committee, which I serve, to try to highlight what some of the inequities are in the COVID-19 vaccine distribution process, but also to call for change and oversight to Governor DeSantis's COVID-19 response. We certainly have several bills that we're still going to file in the next week. They're going to address direct relief to small businesses and individuals, but we know that there's a lot of work ahead in the 2021 legislative session.
None of those seem controversial. This one does. One of your initiatives is to call for legalizing recreational marijuana. Please explain the rationale for your position on this.
Absolutely. Well, we've actually talked about legalizing cannabis on your show before, Greg. And what I said then a couple years ago is still the case today. We know that legalizing cannabis for adult use in the state of Florida just makes sense. We have had a prohibition in our state for as long as most of us can remember. And the consequences of the cannabis prohibition have seriously outweighed really what the benefits of cannabis can be in the state of Florida. First of all, liberty and freedom, but also we know that right now, during times when we have a tight budget, like we do in the state of Florida, a $2.7 billion budget gap, in Florida, this can bring much needed revenue to the state. We know that about $128 million in sales tax in Florida alone. We can help drive tourism as the first state in the South to legalize cannabis. And what may surprise some of your viewers is this legislation we've put forward to legalize cannabis for adult use is actually a bipartisan effort that I launched along with a Republican state senator, Jeff Brandes. And so we believe that it has a sensible framework that can pass a Florida legislature.
Yes or no? Does this just a matter of time?
You know, I've always said it's not a matter of if, but when cannabis will be legalized for adult use. We've already seen so many states have legalized cannabis and the sky didn't fall. In fact, what actually happened was we saw that the use of cannabis by minors, which is prohibited certainly under our bill, has decreased in states that have legalized cannabis. And we have seen tax revenues grow as well to help fund their schools and healthcare services.
You've called for police reforms in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests last summer. What are your prescriptions for those reforms?
That's right. And I'm so glad that you actually brought that up because there are so many important legislative proposals that have been filed this year that we have seen many leaders of the Black Legislative Caucus have sponsored those bills. And so in response to the demonstrations that we saw that were peaceful across the state of Florida, the Black Lives Matter protests, we're committed to the actions, the legislative actions that those words require. That includes limiting no-knock police warrants. That's House Bill 521, a bill that we're excited to be co-sponsoring. We're looking at legislation that would reform qualified immunity so that individual police officers are not shielded from civil liability for egregious behavior. We're looking at a statewide police misconduct registry so that law enforcement who are fired or let go for some of their actions in one law enforcement agency are not easily able to be hired in another law enforcement agency in Florida. So there is so much action that can be taken, and I am proud to be able to put my name on many of those efforts.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Representative Carlos Guillermo-Smith. We have an open door policy. You're welcome to join us anytime you've got news. And also, we've got more news coming up.